What up? It's your man Bentley Kyle Evans, and welcome back to another episode of the Hollywood Blueprint. Now, today we're talking a little bit about writer's room etiquette. Yes, it's a thing. But before we begin, I need you to make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and tell a friend because I post a brand new video every Wednesday. So make sure you let them know. Now, let's talk a little bit about the writer's room in general. So, the writer's room, I think it's exactly what the name says. It's all in the name, the writer's room. And this is a room that is dedicated to the writers to basically create content. It's like a think tank. It's a study hall. It's where the writers come and it's their home away from home, except they got a bunch of roommates and their roommates are all the co-writers that are in that room with them. Um, the writer's room is a very, very interesting place. I mean, it's where people bring their stories together and a lot of great content can be cultivated by the writers coming together and sharing their stories. And that's what happens in the writer's room. And usually the writer's room is just, it's just a big room with a big conference table and maybe a TV on the wall and, a big trash can with a basketball hoop over it because writers are very silly and childlike. And it's like a big playpen for these adults that are controlling what we see on television. It's really funny. But in that writer's room, everyone comes in, and the first day that everyone comes into the writer's room at the beginning of a season, usually it's established where each and every writer is going to sit. It's an unwritten rule. Nobody assigns anybody any seats, but it's like when the writers that are going to be there on this journey decide that they want to sit in a specific seat around that table, usually it's respected by the other writers and it's almost like a first come, first serve. I got this seat first. This is where I'm going to be for the next 5 years if you're fortunate enough to get a 5-year run. And I experienced that early on in my career. Before I even knew what writer's room etiquette was, I did not know anything about writer's room etiquette. I knew nothing about a writer's room, but I learned very, very quick what it was all about. And so my first experience in the writer's room was Martin, the Martin Show. And I think when we started Martin, there were a total of 8 writers on that staff. And we were all in one writer's room with our fearless leader, John Bowman, RIP, who was the original showrunner for Martin. And I quickly adapted to everything that was happening in this. It was exciting, guys. I loved it. But the first thing that I learned was that there was a certain etiquette about being in the writer's room. Now let's talk about hierarchy. The hierarchy is in the level of writer that you've been hired to be. And let me paraphrase that for a moment. Usually, the person that's in charge is the executive producer in most cases, or the head writer in a lot of other cases that is not necessarily the executive producer. But in most cases, in traditional television especially, the head writer and executive producer, showrunner as they call it, sits at the head of the table like he's the father of the table, and everybody has to basically pitch their ideas to this one individual that makes most of the decisions. So that's your showrunner who has the say so about everything that has to do with the show, especially in that writer's room. And all the other writers kind of fall in line after that. There's levels to it. It's really levels to the game. It's your showrunner, executive producer, and then the next level down is the co-executive producer, and then the next level down is the supervising producer, and then the next level down below that is just the producer, the writing producer, and then you go down to co-producer, You go down from there to usually story editor or executive story editor. And then from there, you go down to your staff writer, which is the lowest position on the totem pole. However, they still make a lot of money. I remember my first year as a staff writer on Martin, I was making about $2,500 a week, which in 1992, that's 10 grand a month. That's a lot of dough. So, and I was the low level writer. So, being the low level writer, you quickly know that you are the guy that they send out. Go get some water. Go get some paper to fill up the fax machines or the printers and stuff like that. You're the guy that's treated like a grunt, a $2,500 a week grunt, but you're a grunt because these guys that are upper echelon writers are making. Well, how can I compare it to anything? They're making NBA player money. That's how crazy the money can get in television. And I had no idea going into it. But being in that room, there's a certain hierarchy and a certain level of etiquette that you must abide by while you're there. If not, you're going to be looked at as being a jackass. And a lot of times you may be asked to step outside of the room because you don't know the rules. Like, for instance, one of the things that bothers me particularly is when people take phone calls when we're in the writer's room. So their phone will ring and they'll just, excuse me, and just start talking to their kids in the room. And I'm like, no. Take that shit outside. You got to go outside with that because that's not making sense to me. You're breaking the rules of being, of writer's room etiquette. You're supposed to tell people that you're not taking any calls because it bothers me, because it makes me feel like you don't appreciate this opportunity of being in this writer's room if you're just going to answer your phone at will. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So for me, that's one rule of being in the writer's room that definitely goes against what I would call writer's room etiquette. Again, sometimes people are playing video games on their computers or looking at pornographic stuff on their computer screens. Whatever it is that they're doing and they're not paying attention, that's going against writer's room etiquette. And when people are talking on top of each other and cutting each other's jokes off and stuff like that because they're trying to get the attention of the showrunner, that's not writer's room etiquette. Writer's room etiquette is basically having the respect to respect every other writer in that room and allow them to have the floor when they need to convey whatever it is that they're trying to convey to the room, to the other writers in the room, and also to the showrunner. So a lot of times your showrunner will go around the room and call on you like you're a student in school and say, basically, Johnny, okay, here's the scenario. What do you got? And Johnny will throw out what he thinks. Okay, Marie, what do you have? What are you throwing out? And all these different people are being called upon. And then sometimes somebody will go, no, what I was thinking was, you're not, that's not writer's room etiquette. Allow your other fellow writers to have the floor when they're called upon. A lot of times I've seen other writers eat other writers' food and they know that they didn't order it, but they'll do it. Or I've seen people that didn't wash their hands reach into the community bag of potato chips, and that's not writer's room etiquette, guys. We have to follow certain protocols. And here's the reason why. Because when you're in a writer's room, these other people that are trying to achieve the same thing that you're trying to achieve, they all become your family. The very first thing that I was ever told when I was on the Martin show, when I was on Martin, John Bowman came into my office and he said, hey, I'm going to need you to go to Walmart and you should probably get a first aid kit. You should probably get toothbrush and toothpaste, washcloths, and a sleeping bag or some sort of blanket. I thought he was joking. I really thought he was joking. And I go ahead, John. And he was like, no, very, very serious. What he was saying to me was basically, this is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time for the next year. So if I were you, I would tell your friends, I'll see you in the summertime because you're not going to have time for anything else. This is your priority. This is where you're going to be. And that's a true statement. And so I did that. I went and got some blankets and stuff like that because I did spend a many a nights at Martin and never made it home because that's what the requirement was. Because that writer's room, when the writer's room went, you better be in it. And if you weren't in it, you were missing out on an opportunity to get a script thrown in your direction. Which, by the way, when you got an extra script, even though you were on staff, they still paid you extra for that script. And just for reference, scripts at that time were selling for about $27,000 per script. So that's what when you're in the Writers Guild, and that's what the Writers Guild minimum was at that time. Well, a lot of things have changed because now they're like 35,000 a script or something like that. But I digress. Let me get back to the story. The story is we're in the writer's room and you learn that these people are now your priority. You need to learn how not to offend them. And I had a lot of writers that used to irk the hell out of me. Like there was this one writer, Lisa, and she used to bring her pet parrot to work. And it was one of those parrots that used to talk, right? So you're in the writer's room and you're throwing out stuff. Although the bird was down the hall, you would still hear the bird say crazy things like, Martin and Gina, Martin. And you'd be like this, can somebody do something about this damn bird? So one time, we the writers, we thought we'd play a practical joke on her. And we got a taxidermied version of her parrot. It was a dead parrot, and we threw the dead parrot on the floor outside the writer's room and told Lisa that she had a package. And so when she stepped outside, she sees this dead bird, and the woman almost went into cardiac arrest. And we thought it was so funny, but she was dead serious. She was going to put lawsuits on all of us. I mean, we had to go on the apology tour. It was a really bad thing. And although it was funny, it broke writer's room etiquette. You never want to break writer's room etiquette because these people are the most important people to you. It's like a chain. Everybody's armed. We're arm to arm. It's us against the actors. It's us against the director. It's us trying to get our story told correctly and have that director be able to put it in the can the proper way. So that's what writer's room etiquette is about. It's about the respect level that you have for your fellow writer and not doing anything that you wouldn't do at the table when you're eating with your mother and father. If you got your elbows on the table, you're going to get slapped. Same thing goes in the writer's room. Have some etiquette. Have a little bit of decorum about yourself. Make sure that people want to be around you. And the last story that I'll share is, I remember there was one time where one writer both writers had been there the entire season, but we were getting toward the end, and it was like getting toward the last day of school. Everybody's antsy. They're ready to get the hell out of there. And one of the writers decided that they were going to sit in another writer's chair, in their seat. And our writer, John, I won't say his last name. It wasn't John Bowman, but I won't say his last name. John comes in and says, hey, Cheryl, you got to get out of my seat. And she says, there's no names on these seats. And she had just been annoying him all season long. And you could just see it was making him shut down. So they get into this heated argument. And we're all sitting there with popcorn watching. And she says, John, nobody's scared of you. And he goes, all you got to do is say one more thing to me. Just one more thing. And that's going to be your ass. And she said, one more thing. It was like something out of a movie. He jumps up from his chair and he dives across the table with every intention to choke the shit out of this woman. But he can't get to her because we all dove on top of him and stopped him from creating this scene in the writer's room. And it was a very scary situation. And we had to calm him down. And she thought it was the funniest thing on the planet. She's just laughing, and we're like, Cheryl, cut it out. He's gonna hurt you. Well, he's gone on to do big things, and I'm sure she has too. But I just wanted to bring that story up because I thought it was a very funny story and a very fun example of what breaking writer's room etiquette is. Really, she started it because she sat in his seat. but he took it to the next level. And if I could just add one last one, there was the time that one of our writers was having a domestic problem at home, and so he decided that he was going to bring his gun into the writer's room and put it on the table. And you should have saw these white people. They ran out of that room. They were terrified. Well, we brothers, we done seen guns in the hood and stuff like that. So I wasn't really concerned. I was just like, hey man, this ain't the right place for that. So we all talked him into putting his gun up. Now the reason why he had his gun was because sometimes at lunch we would go to the shooting range and just let off some bullets and just practice our shots and stuff like that. But this particular day, I don't know what was on his mind, but he brought that gun into the writer's room, and I was like, oh, this is about to get interesting. It was like a mailroom type of situation. So that was the biggest example of how you do not break writer's room etiquette. Writer's room etiquette is a real thing. Respect it. Have you ever had any writer's room experience that went completely against the grain of writer's room etiquette? If you have, or if you can think of any, leave those comments below. I want to hear about them. Y'all make sure y'all leave all the comments and everything, because I'm here to share stories and experience about what my blueprint has been all about.